to the Merchants of Joy podcast series. We love to showcase people, entrepreneurs, small business owners who bring joy to the world through their products and services. And today, our Merchant of Joy is Mr. Shenton Gregory, also known as Shenzo Gregorio. And I'm also proud to call Shenzo a dear friend. And he is going to be interviewed today. So sit back, relax, enjoy the music, and we'll see you soon. Welcome back, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our Merchants of Joy podcast. Our very special guest today is Mr. Shenton Gregory, also known as Shenzo Gregorio. Have I got that right, Shenzo?
You have. Shenzo Gregorio, yes. Japanese Italian. So
it flows beautifully.
Right?
Yeah.
I'm so Japanese Italian.
So Shenzo, as I said earlier in the intro, is actually an old friend. We met easily over 20 years ago. And I remember we were talking about this earlier when I first encountered Shenzo. We hadn't actually met on this occasion. It was, I was off to see a play in Brisbane with some friends. And the moment I walked into the venue to be seated, suspended above me from the ceiling was this gentleman in full decked out coattails with a pair of white, pretty large, angelic wings sprouting out of his back. And he was just hanging, playing violin. And of course, violin is your major instrument, so to speak.
Sometimes it's a minor instrument as well, but in general, it's my major instrument.
But you are obviously Shenzo is very multi-talented. He can dabble, if you want to call it that, but with virtuosic prowess, I have to say. And there's many different styles that you've played music for in collaboration with many other musicians, and it's quite a broad spectrum. But it's not so much more the mainstream ilk, is it? The styles? No,
it's not. You're not going to hear it on B105 anytime soon. So you kind of have to find it. It's out there somewhere, under the radar, very much so. But I mean, you could world music, jazz. Got into bluegrass and country in the last few years as well. Right. Again, that sort of exists under the Tamworth Country Music Festival goes on, but then there's this under the radar kind of like almost fringe scene where they're playing virtuosic versions of bluegrass and country pieces of music. Right. So wherever there's a style of music, there is various virtuosic levels to it. And the violin, thankfully, slots perfectly in to a number of those styles,
of course,
and has a tradition in which I've got inspired by over the years. So that journey, probably will be never ending, because there's lots of styles of music that use it traditionally, but there's also styles of music that have only maybe started using it. And we could say, like, for example, flamenco music, the violin has kind of come to the party quite late in the evolution there. And certainly there's very few people in Australia who do it. But people are catching up to it, obviously, in Spain and Europe and so forth. But here it's like, I think I maybe know of one other person who does it. Like, it's specifically with flamenco. But then in gypsy jazz, you go, well, there's probably 20, 30, 50 people out there doing it. And maybe 12, you could say, were super professional doing it on a regular basis. But still, it's still not a lot of people when you compare it to if you'd gone and joined an orchestra where you've got, 10 first violinists, another 10 second violinists in just that one orchestra, and then every orchestra that exists around the country. So orchestras, chamber orchestras, string quartets, that's where violins are typically seen, or they're performing solo. They're not typically seen in all these other styles of music. And I've only got into them because I just had this kind of curiosity about it, and I wondered why there wasn't more violinists doing it. Like, it just sort of, I found it quite surprising. But it was an opportunity that I took, and I went, and I started to enjoy it. That was the thing that I really found that continued my inspiration, was the enjoyment factor.
Because you would have been, obviously, I suppose, because you started at age 4, right?
Yeah.
That was you the first time.
Yeah.
And so learning all through that, the standard academic style, classically trained.
Classically trained, yes.
And did you study at uni as well? When you left school, you would have done...
I feel like I did my life's classical work from about age 4 to about 21. Was when I just got it all. I didn't get all of it out of the way, but I got a good chunk of it. And because once I went to Brisbane State High School in Brisbane, I was, doing the music program at school. And then in grade 9, I went to the Young Conservatorium on a Thursday for 4 hours. And then on the weekend, it was Queensland Youth Orchestra. And then back on Monday, it was orchestra rehearsals at school. And then there was my AME-B violin exams during the week, for practicing pieces for that. And that went on then through university as well, where I did another 4 years of classical violin tuition. But then when I was at university, I started getting a bit more interested in these other styles, and I started moonlighting, you could say, at night with Irish or bush bands or jazz groups, just experimenting in Brisbane region mostly, and not really knowing a little bit about it, but not enough that I was getting regular work with that. I was still doing regular classical work and dabbling in these other styles, dipping my toes into these other styles of music and seeing where it went. And quite often the Conservatorium of Music in Brisbane was a place where people would call up and go, "G'day, we need a violin player for our rock band." And people would be like, Shenzo says yes to everything. Just get him to do it. And so no one would take the call for the random person ringing up the con. So I ended up in all these bands, and they started being rock bands. They started being hillbilly bands. They started being all bush bands, all sorts of bands, Irish bands. I literally had this philosophy in the beginning just to say yes to everything and figure out what I kind of liked. And so
free sampling, and you could just decide, that's the one for me.
You know what? I'm not really into bush music anymore, or I'm not. I love, like it was all great fun. But after a while, it was like, okay, I think
you could sort of fine tune it a bit. Pardon the fun, but
I think I prefer to do this, or this challenges me, because I can't quite still do this yet. So then I would lean more towards the things I couldn't do.
So, for example, to see you suspended from the ceiling for a play about Salvador Dali, and then I'm wondering, because the beginning of your career, I imagine, was a lot involved with the Electric Stunt Orchestra, which was pretty extraordinary to see. If you ever had the opportunity, if you were in Brisbane around Christmas time especially, and you had, how many other members of that group were there? 3 or 4?
There was 4 in total, but we had 6 rigging personnel behind us, making us fly around. So it was a 10-piece band but you could only see 4 musicians live. But we had a further 6 technical people, like doing all the the flying and rigging.
It's quite a big operation to have that spectacle, if you like. It was pretty extraordinary, and that was the repertoire was mostly sort of classical pieces transcribed to a more rockier version.
That's right. I guess I took all that classical training and went, all right, well, let's do something with it. So I mean, I could have just done that on the stage without all the rigging, and it still would have been, that's a well thought out arrangement, or that's an entertaining presentation. But the flying aspect to it, just, in this day and age, to get people's attention on classical music, it's like you've got to wake them up a little bit, because they're so used to hearing 1812 Overture for the God knows how many times. It's like, well, what can I bring to the table that's different? And I guess that's what was a struggle at first with classical music, is like, what can you bring differently? You can't, there's a very narrow window in which to pass through to create difference of classical music, because you are reproducing what was written hundreds of years ago as close as possible to the original. But to do a new version or a new presentation, in a way it's all been done, like out there in the world. So to do something highly original is really, really tricky these days, especially with classical music, because at some point people go, oh, you've messed with the original too much now, and now it's no longer
purists out there who
but it's also no longer the original. So at what point there's a fine line, you can easily cross it. So but the presentation of it, in this case, flying around upside down playing was like, it was doing itself a great service, but at the same time there were still people still not convinced it was real. They were still thinking, wait, no, he can't be doing that, he's miming that. That can't be happening. Like how is that even possible? So that was quite of a frustrating position. Like the minute anything went wrong, or there was like a little crash or a little technical error, and people were like, oh wow, this is real. It's like, what? But wait, You mean to say we've got to do this every single show, that it's got to be a little mini disaster for you to wake up and realize it's real? So anyway, but that
But it's so worth it though.
Oh, absolutely.
And I imagine that kind of performance starting in Brisbane, that must have taken you to, well, that's sort of the beginning, because I know that you travelled extensively for your whole career basically.
Yeah. YouTube was, when YouTube was first coming out, you could get a video of whatever you were doing at the time and then put it up on the internet.
Yeah.
And that is how we got our first international gig from doing the performances in Brisbane.
Wow.
We got asked by the Singapore Arts Festival or something in 2004. So YouTube had only been around 6 months or 12 months or whatever.
Yeah, right.
And it was because of that it sort of then went on the internet. It didn't go viral necessarily, but it spread to the right people at the right time. And then, you didn't have to send something in the mail anymore. It was like, hey, just click on this link. It became so easy to promote your thing and get it out there. So again, when you look at anyone's career, it's all about those very important factors and timing of those factors coming together.
Yeah.
It suddenly makes something go in the direction that it does.
Yeah.
And certainly with that whole flying thing, people ask me, all the time, how did you wake up one night with a dream, having had a dream? Is that how that came about? It came about through circumstances that does take a while to describe, but basically myself and my sister put on an awards night for musicians in Brisbane in 1999. And we were like gigging musicians at the time, just locally in Brisbane. And my sister, who had this idea, was like, why isn't there like the equivalent of the Logies, but for musicians? So she came up with this idea of calling it the Mogie, like a musician's Logie.
That's a great idea.
And so at that performance was when we were like, oh, well, we'll have to like have some whiz-bang performer. Let's make something up on the poster. So we wrote Shenzo Gregorio, stunt violinist, direct from Las Vegas. That is how it started. So in a way, a complete lie. In a way, there was no Shenzo, there was no stunt, and he was not from Las Vegas. And my sister being quite, it'll be fine.
Yeah, I love that.
But then it was up to me just to somehow pull that off. So anyway, I won't go into there's so much to that story alone, but that's how things can start in such a bizarre way. And it's like someone just went, Shenzo, we're going to put you on that roller coaster, and now you're on it. Now you can choose to get off at any point in time, but I stayed on it and kept going, oh, well, I guess this is not so scary after all, like the whole flying thing, getting to understand all the mechanics and the technical jargon that goes behind all that. You realize actually this is safer than walking across the street after a while. Like all these devices that are holding you up are rated in tons of weight, like a safety factor of 10. The only thing that would make that go wrong is human error. Like if you didn't like put it on properly or clip it in properly, or if the rigger didn't.
Like a cliffhanger moment.
Like a cliffhanger moment, exactly. So, I got more comfortable with it, and it in fact, by default, that whole process actually cured any stage fright.
I was going to say, because it would have been addictive as well. That's such a thrill to be wing up into the sky.
It's an absolute, like that's...
And syncopated with the music as well.
Yeah, like...
extra rush.
It became extra fun to perform Vivaldi's Spring compared to just normal. Which was still fine, but to be honest, I'd worn out Vivaldi's Spring so many times because I'd been playing it at weddings and stuff, and everyone wanted it at their wedding, so it was like 7 times every weekend.
Yeah, a bit samey.
After 2 or 3, maybe 5 years of that, you're like, I'm never going to play this piece.
Something
I never want to play this piece. Exactly, I never want to play this piece again. But then, if you're getting flung around like it's a ride at Dreamworld, sure, I'll play Vivaldi's Spring. So, and then of course the audience's reaction is what kind of keeps you going with that. Like they're just going, giving you applause and thanking you and stuff. And so, but there's a thrill with all that certainly was so much fun in the years that we did.
Magic. Well, having seen it myself, I remember it vividly, and it was really something, and I feel quite privileged to have been able to see it, because that kind of thing is so rare, doesn't come along all the time. And it was exceptional. It was really fun. And fun, you could see, when you see the joy in someone performing, it just, you feel the joy as well. And did I just knock that off there? Sorry. Whoop. And it is infectious. That's what I love about it. When you see someone enjoying so much their thing, whatever their pull is, with their talents and how it can be conveyed in a way that's just gorgeous. So that brings me sort of fast forward now to we're sitting at your property in a small rural town called Canungra. I had to be very purposeful to make sure I pronounced that right. And you've set up the most gorgeous, exquisite space for you and your musical friends, colleagues, collaborators to come along and enjoy this amazing space. And it's housing even a dance floor for some flamenco dancing. You've got beautiful, I mean, we'll do a little tour later on to show you the outer, beyond the camera. And the magnificence of that, not a baby grand, that is a grand piano. Now, I'm always intrigued by synchronicities in life and manifesting and things that just come into your life effortlessly, seemingly. Can you tell me how that magnificent thing came to be in your possession?
Yeah, well, it's weird. I never put anything on a vision board or had a moment of like, I really need a grand piano in the shed. I was just like, it was a very fleeting moment of thought that wouldn't it be great to have a piano in the shed? But I thought to myself, well, there's no way that, if you'd spent, some money on it, think that you'd want to put it in a shed. You'd want to put it inside the house, probably. So that came about thanks to Facebook and the network of musicians and friends that exist on it that go, grand piano, someone needs to offload it ASAP, message if you're interested or something. And I was like, what's that? And, I looked at it and went, is it still available? And it was through a violinist friend of mine who was more my friend of my sister's than me. But within a few hours, I was in touch with the owner of the piano and said, look, I'm just curious. Can I come out and have a bit of a play on it, and I'll drive. So I had to drive an hour and 20 minutes or something to go check it out with no expectation whatsoever. She said it was a bit old. She didn't play herself, so she couldn't go into any detail about how worn out or how much restoration it might need. So, but she did say, it's 1860, it's like, wow. I was like, wow, that's quite an old piano.
1860. That's extraordinary.
She had some evaluation done on it. It did sound at first like an expensive evaluation. Expensive restoration, if you wanted to get it back to absolute prime condition, which didn't concern me because I was like, I know a few people who can fix and tune and stuff. And so I quickly I went there, had a bit of a play of it, took some video, sent it to a friend who I thought might be able to fix it. And then, I had to make a decision within about 12 hours. The next morning, I got a message back from my friend going, yeah, I can tune that and fix that for nothing. And then the lady herself was like, look, I really need to offload it. You look like the sort of person who could take care of it. I sort of do want to give it to someone who's going to maybe look after it. I will pay for its move, which is never ever the deal. It's always like, here's a free piano and you pay for the move.
Yeah.
So I was like, all right, so it all seems like it's all coming together without much effort. 12 hours it took. And then,
it's insane.
But the thing that only made it possible was the platform, the space, in order for it, because if I didn't rent here and I was still touring on the road, there's no way I would put that in storage and pay storage fees for something I can't even use. So really it comes down to providing the platform from which to attract things into your life, really,
exactly.
Is the definitive point, really.
That's the major cooperative component that comes together.
That's how it turns up.
Yeah.
But then also a whole bunch of, you could say stars align, but also a whole bunch of contacts in the industry, be it the music industry. I'm in it, so it makes sense that all those things converged to produce, I guess, like good luck in a lot of ways. And so, like tomorrow, my friend turns up and tunes it. Hopefully it'll be, over the next few days, we'll get it to concert pitch. There is one or two keys that might need a bit of tweaking. And then by the end of next week, we should be able to say it's ready to rock and played properly in front of an audience. So,
beautiful.
Yeah, so it's...
and that's the thing, to have this space to accommodate something as grand as that. Because, as I said earlier, you've travelled so much for your work up until, I guess... Well, obviously, this is the year 2020, COVID year. And I can imagine when that presented itself, you just had to stop, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, they say that it's BC, before COVID, after
Yeah,
COVID.
right,
Like, it's a point in history.
Everyone's going to.
Everyone will.
What were you doing the day when?
And what was your like reaction to it? You know, did you like, give up and do something else, or did you bend with the breeze? Did you adapt?
Yeah.
How did you approach it, and how did it affect you? And what is your COVID project in a way? Like, what's come out of it? So
were you fairly apprehensive? I mean, I know everyone was fairly shit scared at the beginning because it was just so unknown. How are we going to handle this? But for you, because you've only just recently moved to this property, is that right?
It's been 3 months now.
Yeah. And so you just decide you can either roll with the punches, like you say, or because it did force you to stop. And did you find any solace in doing that, even though you didn't realise maybe at the time, wow, I have to slow down now and just, be still? Yeah,
well, it's funny because I got to a point, I'd just been touring with this circus show overseas quite a bit, and I just, like the year before, I'd been on a 3-month tour overseas, and I found touring for that amount of time quite like hotel room after hotel room, airport, venue, hotel room.
Yeah.
And then you'd have all this, like literally stage time was about 5% of it, and the other 95% is just waiting.
Yeah, right.
You're just like you're at the airport waiting, you're at the hotel waiting. I mean, you make use of that time as best as you can, obviously. You're not just sitting there waiting. But like you take for granted all those things that you have at your disposal when you're back at home, like just popping in your own car and popping down to wherever you want to go that day. You can't do that on tour. You can't. I mean, you can hire a car, but then you don't have much time because you've got to get back to the show by 4 o'clock that afternoon. So, it's the touring life is it really depends on what you're touring and who you're touring with as to how best you can make it work.
Yeah, I bet.
And up until that point, I'd been touring solidly up until COVID, I'd been actually touring pretty solidly for 4.5 years straight.
Wow.
So that was not renting anywhere. But prior to that, touring had started after I left university back in 1998. So I've been touring on and off and had periods where it's been intense, 3 months, 4 months, and then back in Brisbane for a bit, then another week here or 2 weeks there. And the whole not renting thing only happened twice. And it happened 4.5 years just recently, and then it happened a 2-year period, 5 years, 7 years ago as well. So I've done 6.5 years of no fixed address touring, which is that's a long time to be living out of a suitcase and storage, and not having and so you get used to. I've got so used to that world, and so when it actually came to the point of stopping, I was like, I actually need a break from this anyway.
So it was fortuitous in a way.
So it was fortuitous, and so I'm enjoying the fact that I can be still for a while. I can set something up in how I want to set it up. I'm not like, because when you're under someone else's roof, you're under those rules of that roof. Right. But when you've got your own roof and your own platform, you can construct it how you want, and you can't do that on tour.
Yeah.
Unless you say, all right, I'm not touring for a while. I'm just going to, small term rent for a month or something. Then maybe you could. But in here, I've been here for 3 months already, and it's taken this long to get this space to a point where I'm almost happy. In and amongst other work that I've got to do. So it's not been a constant project, but it's been a.
But you created an oasis essentially, which is something that you never would have really had to sort of look forward to, especially at the end of a gig, or if you're on tour and you want to just come home and relax in your space.
I mean, it's also the fact that when I look at all these venues I've played in, and I see all the sound complaints that they get from neighbours, you get all these restrictions. You just go, the only place it's possible where no one's going to shut whatever it is you're doing down is to go out into the bush somewhere. But then how far have you got to go in order to not get complaints?
Hello, Canungra.
Hello, Canungra, opposite the Canungra Kokoda Barracks Military Jungle Warfare Training Forest as my front neighbour. So they've got no problems with music. And then the people like half a kilometre down the road have heard what has gone on here in a few sound checks, And my partner, Ali, who's bumped into them, has gone, well, the only time we're going to be disappointed is if we're not invited to whatever it is that you're doing. So please let us know when you're doing something. So, you know, it's been, you know, like.
And this is 60 acres, isn't
It's 60 acres, and but even with 60 acres, it's still possible to be heard.
Yeah, right.
You know, so even, and I'm not doing anything. You know, I haven't done anything crazy loud in here yet, other than one band rehearsal, and I bought a djembe. Don't tell anyone. I bought a djembe, and when you hit just one djembe alone in here is like, wow, that's huge sound. And especially when you play it outside, it just bounces off all the trees and goes everywhere. I mean, they were designed to send a message to a warring faction on the other side of the mountain, you know, in Africa. That's what they're designed to do. So it's any wonder that it can be heard. So, you know, but as far as like, having a rehearsal space, even if it was just a rehearsal space, that alone is
sacred for a musician, and that's... what a breath of fresh air.
Nowadays, it's so hard just to find that and go, we've got 1 hour, right, go, rehearse. And it's like, so the plan, the COVID situations allowed this to come into fruition, but there's a big future, I think, with this type of thing over the next few years, especially while COVID works itself out. Big festivals are not going to happen for a little while. Chamber music is back in, basically. Like the idea that we're returning to something that was a tried and tested technology 200 years ago will exist again, just slightly under different circumstances, be it a shed as opposed to, you know, a lounge room, you could say, but you know, it's nothing new to
but
do.
You brought the lounge room to the shed. I mean,
exactly.
It's just...
you bring the lounge room to the shed.
It's wonderful.
It's you know, it's just such an inspiring space to kind of, you know, a passion project. You know, I did have to cancel my Netflix 3 months ago in order to free up time, and I'm very glad I did, because, you know, it's all about...
I know that can be a hard thing to do.
It can be a hard thing to do.
But speaking of passion projects, so that brings me to the 40-hour jamming. So that's been you're up to year 4 now, aren't you?
Fourth incarnation, third year of existence since it first started, which almost 3 years to the day. November 17 was when we did it. So so it's
and that was created out of a diagnosis that your mother received for motor neurons disease?
So motor neuron disease kind of struck my mum pretty late in life. She was 83, which is not that common for the disease to strike at that age, but so it was really quite traumatic there for a number of months. We didn't know what it was that was affecting my mum, and so the last thing literally on the list is like, well, we've checked all this is not that, it can't be this, it's like everything is pointing towards motor neuron disease, and then that news is pretty tragic to be told that, because there's no cure, there's no the survival rate's quite low. You know, Stephen Hawkins was probably the most famous person that's outlived it for a fair distance, a fair chunk of time. But my reaction to it was, well, my immediate reaction in the hospital when we were told the news was like, well, we've got to fight that somehow. I didn't know how at the time. The more I started doing my little bit of my own research into it, I then realized there were these charities out there that were fundraising to find a cure or to support people who have it. So, and funnily enough, it was literally down the road from where our parents were living at the time in East Brisbane. So I literally walked in there, and my dad called him up or something before and said, and I went in there and chatted to the guy and went, I've got this crazy idea. I set up a fundraising page last night. I want to raise $40,000 by playing music for 40 hours with hardly any breaks, and I need somewhere to do it. And the guy was like, yeah, well, we saw that you'd already, like, within 12 hours we'd raised $1,500 from people going, oh, we like that idea. And your mum's got what? You know, it was just like, and then it's like, and then we chatted to the charity and they went, well, you can either do it in 3 weeks time or in 2 months time. And my mum just went, 3 weeks time.
3 weeks, please,
And so it was like, all right, we've got 3 weeks to put this on. So
no pressure.
No pressure, and like no rehearsal. Like it was not like, okay, so what does playing for 40 hours involve? I have no idea. I have no idea. All I know is that when people have done Guinness Book of Record attempts, that they spend the Guinness Book of Records allow a record attempt to take a 5-minute break per hour of any type of record like that. So there's people who have gone, I'm playing violin for 25 hours, or I'm going to play the nose flute for 6 weeks or something, whatever. They can take a 5-minute break per hour. And they, if they, because it's been fully like documented and adjudicated, and they go back over that whole time and go, oh yeah, you played for 55 minutes and you took a 5-minute tea break or whatever. Or, as I later found out, you can compound your break of 5 minutes and then make a 20-minute nap version after, say, 4 or 5, maybe 6 hours of being on stage. So that's how I got around. So I tried to follow that rule as close as possible, even though I wasn't setting that record. Because I actually found out the longest performance was 2 weeks from some amazing tabla guru in a cave in Rajasthan. I'm
Good
like,
on him.
I'm going, I don't think I'm going to try and attempt to break that record. That's not what it's, that's not
You don't
what,
want to steal his thunder.
I don't want to steal his thunder. And I don't, it's not really about like, hey, I'm setting a record. It's more about raising money or raising awareness. Anyway, so cut a long story short, that whole thing raised $20,000 in the first instance, and I came off that first event like pretty exhausted, obviously, having been up for so long, and it certainly pushed the boundaries of mental awareness and body awareness and what food you eat and so forth. So I had a pretty strict diet. I had, during the event, and I could see that there is a connection between diet and how effective you are as a person. And
100%.
And there's God knows how many books written about it. And but feeling it for 100% was a huge eye opener. So, I've learned so much out of that whole process, and so now I'm still raising. I raised 20,000 for it, and I was like, I didn't reach the goal. I was like, I want to get to the 40. That's what I set out to achieve. And so I put on the 40-hour jamming again, another 2 more times, up on Magnetic Island, and was given the opportunity to take it up there. So that's how it got over 40. It ended up going to 65,000. And then I was like, well, this is actually a good concept for a music festival, micro music festival anyway, and I like this concept. So I'm going to continue raising money for the charity, because 350 Queenslanders still have MND, where there's still people out there to have it. But then COVID struck. It was like, well, wait, artists who normally go, yeah, all right, I'll help you with your fundraising thing. Wait, I don't have any gigs anymore, and I need support. We all need support in some fashion now, more than we've ever had to ask for it. So this event's actually raising money for COVID, and so COVID artists affected by COVID, and also for the charity as well. So we've figured out a split of 40% for the charity, 40% for the artists on a profit share situation, and 20% to run the thing, because we didn't get any grants to put it on because we were too late in applying. It was such a last minute kind of thing for this year's event. So so that's happening in 11 days time. And it'll be another on stage for 40 hours, jumping in and weaving in other people's music. We're booking acts like a festival would book an act. I'll accompany where necessary. I'll take my little break or something, whatever. But I'll be up again for 2 hours. Have to be on a pretty strict diet. But again, once you set that platform, the parameters are very like the mind is working away at that prior to build your resistance to it. So if you're setting a fairly like Mount Everest moment in your life, it's amazing what the mind you're challenging your beliefs on that every second that you're awake. You're laying this very important foundation. So by the time you do it, now I've done it obviously 3 times before, or 1 time seriously, intensely before, and the other 2 events I did on Magnetic Island, I did stay up the whole time, but I wasn't performing the whole time because I was organising.
Yeah, of course.
There's a whole bunch of stuff.
Huge project.
Organising. So yeah, it's a huge project, but it's I love it. I love it because it connects music and art with a purpose other than just purely entertainment for the audience, and and also just purely for that fun of performing. There's a bigger light at the end of the tunnel. There's this, hey, we've raised this money for this situation, which is one of God knows how many that could be fixed. I'm just narrowing in on the one that was kind of slapped across my face at the time.
Very personal.
Very personal. It's like, wait, wake up. This is what This is one way of connecting your value of what you do. And it's amazing that so many people have kind of rallied around me and supported. So it's not just me doing it. There's, we've got 70 odd musicians at the next event. We've got volunteers helping out. People will donate, obviously, that come to the event. So there's a whole, when you look at it, there's 100 or so people jumping in on the whole thing. And lots of people are giving, and I think it's that spirit of giving that has this sort of power to it. And
it does, because it just creates more abundance and more. There's more. There's such a loving connection that comes out of it as well, and everyone thrives on that. I mean, who doesn't want that in their lives? And it's just fun as well. It's a wonderful collaboration.
It's so much fun, and I.
Because the fun, we forget to have fun sometimes, right?
It's easy to forget to have fun.
From such a poignant subject initially, but then to bring that kind of joy to it it's magic.
Yeah, I think it's that thing of like flipping a disaster around. Like it's a disastrous situation, and you could be just like, at the end of the day, just be concentrating on the negative aspect to it, or you do have the power to flip something around to a positive, no matter how disastrous it may be. It's entirely our choice every single day that we're awake and alive to either perceive disaster as disaster, or in nature's definition, disaster is creation. The minute a cyclone or a flood comes through to nature and clears a bit of forest, a whole bunch of other trees grow, right?
Exactly.
And so they actually thrive on disaster. A bushfire comes through,
regrowth. It's all new.
That's only our definition of it that sees it as a negative thing, like a super negative thing. I don't, obviously wish disease on anyone, but you've got to look at it and go, well, why has disease turned up? And it
forces you to become, introspective and look at, what your lifestyle choices are. All
absolutely,
that sort of
absolutely.
And it manifests in that way.
That's right, and you can be in a preventative measure rather than a quick fix this situation that just suddenly came upon me. That's a too late solution. You need to be in a preventative frame of mind to prevent, say, disease like affecting you as a human. Like that. That's a much more sustainable and achievable course of action than suddenly going, well, I've been diagnosed with category 4 lung cancer. Geez, all right, I'll have juices. It's like, well, wait, you should have been doing that your whole life. You should have been having a healthy juice every morning you wake up if you wanted to prevent yourself from getting something, or whatever it might be. So so I think that's been it's been a great wake-up call for me, because I've looked at it and gone, all right, well,
it's a gift in some ways, isn't it?
In some ways it is, absolutely. There's a gift in all of that, like, because and through by looking back in retrospect, you can then see, wow, well, if it wasn't for that, none of that would have happened. So it's interesting how that all pans out.
I love it. I love that. I really am always intrigued by that, how any major contrast that you experience in your life will always birth the seed of something that's quite extraordinary, profound, prosperous, just a wonderful new chapter that you enter into as a result of that.
Definitely.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And I'm really intrigued by, we're all about seeking out what gives people joy, and obviously for you in what you do for a living as a merchant of joy is to obviously bring joy to others. But is there anything sort of, on the side of music? Because I do find it fascinating to ask people, for especially musicians, and I suppose actors as well would fall into this category. Can you enjoy attending a venue where there is entertainment, music, or some performance, and can you just enjoy it for the sake of what it is? Or are you busy scheming away in your mind going, oh, if only they had, or if they should have, or maybe that would sound better if, or can you ever enjoy it just for the sake of enjoying what's on offer?
It's so
a quality, quality
I know exactly what you mean, because you can flip, you can take hats off and put your analytical, musical, if it was me in that situation, hat, I would have done ... absolutely. Like, but I don't really, I wish I had more time to go and just be the audience, be the random audience, and just see it. And I do learn a lot from watching other shows, and because part of me is just sitting back and relaxing, but also part of the brain's kind of soaking it in and learning at the same time.
Yeah, right.
And it's also learning from watching something that's not necessarily good as much as it would from something that's brilliant.
Yeah.
I learn something no matter what. So whether I'm seeing, you know, Australian Chamber Orchestra do a spotless, beautiful, perfect performance, or if I'm seeing someone who's just learning guitar from 1 week ago at the local pub, I'm learning something.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what it is, and that for me is the spectrum of variation is never boring. It's never dull. There's always going to be something there that I can find to enjoy. Either enjoying it from the sake of like, oh, it's just so nice to sit back and listen to some music, or I'm hearing, you know, something that's like, I mean, I went and saw Jacob Collier, who's like one of these freak musicians who, you know, who does all the most incredible stuff, and you know, I had to go see it live. I was sure it's on YouTube and whatever with all the fancy editing, but what's it like, you know, in the flesh? And you know, someone like that, I just go, you know, it's just, in that situation, I was completely surrendering to it.
Awe.
As watching someone just effortlessly create music on stage is just a joy, because I get to sit there and I get to be the audience. Which I don't get to do a heck of a lot, because when you're at a festival and you're performing at the festival, your mind's sort of switched on in that frame of mind, going, oh, what time? Oh, I've got to get to I've got to go. So yeah, but interesting with the sort of referring back to the jamming for a second, that world sort of crosses into multiple worlds, in the sense that you know, you can be performing on stage or some kind of stage with musicians having not played any pre-worked out or pre-rehearsed stuff, and you're just spontaneously making music up. That doesn't happen that often on a stage where someone's paying to see it, as much as it is the polished performance. The polished performance is what people will pay $80 Australian Chamber Orchestra. Or I want to see something amazing. But the thing with the 48 jamming thing is, I've tried to like combine all those worlds in where you've got a polished moment, then you've got like a moment of, like, we're just going to bring the Tibetan singer in for a second over this piece that we would never do this normally, and see what happens. And the audience is like, oh my God, that moment when the such and such happened with that. What was that? Did you work that? No, we just made that up on the spot. Really?
It's always the way, isn't it? The more spontaneous moments where all these wonderfully talented, skilled musicians and artists can come together and just create something out of spontaneity, improvisation.
Yeah.
And it's, I mean, it's almost like, you know, if you get to watch bloopers or something from your favorite comedy show, that's often the best parts of the whole production. And I imagine that would apply also to a musical performance. Even with, I remember seeing flamenco shows, and they'd all get up at the end of the show and have their go at dancing or doing their bit spontaneously. And more times often than not, that would just be the most entertaining component of the whole show.
Totally.
But yeah, there's a magic in that unknown until it's actually born out of that moment, being in the moment, being present.
Yeah, and I think,
and in that beautiful flow.
That's right. And I think I was chatting about this whole process not so long ago with a musician friend of mine from Lismore, a guy called Dr. Barry Hill, and he came up with this expression, this word that describes these worlds, compromisation. So that's a mixture of composition and improvisation. Compromisation is actually more the accurate term when it comes to the initial spark for a creative idea. And you kind of need to have that hat on when you are in those moments of spontaneity. Suddenly you've got to make stuff up, or, you know, it's where jazz musicians obviously live in that world, where they're kind of thinking compositionally, like I'm going to improvise a melody or a solo that's in the same way constructed like a Mozart's first movement symphony number whatever, in that it starts and builds and gets to a point and then it tapers off. It's the same process, but it's done in the moment, as opposed to meticulously behind the scenes, rehearsed and then performed. And so those two worlds, if you're the composer sitting at the piano, okay, what piece am I going to play? dum bum bum bum. No, how about dum? You know, a few goes later. That's the compromisation. That's the improvisation and composition coming together, and then it's written down, and then it's called composition.
Yeah.
And in jazz, improvisation is like, I want it to sound like a composition, but I'm improvising it. So these worlds are continually like interchanging with each other.
Yeah.
And so
it just creates this beautiful dance.
Yeah,
and everyone can feel that in the room, right?
Absolutely, they can feel it in the room. But with certain styles of music, that if you call it, say you were to see a jazz gig, you are on the edge more. You're on the edge of your seat more because you know a little bit of what's going on.
Yeah.
If you do know. But then if you don't know anything about jazz, you might be a little bit confused.
Right.
Right? Because like, well, why? You know, but with classical music, it's Eineklein, it's Pachelbel Kennen. Oh, great! I don't have to think too much. I can just sit back and relax and enjoy that beautiful melody. Sure, beautiful composed melody that is recognizable, and it just brings a sense of calm. You know, which is what its purpose. You know, there's all this purpose to music. When you look at the story behind why a piece was written. And its application, you know, in this day and age, our experience of classical music, you know, Mozart is probably while driving more so than it is actually seeing it performed live. In fact, a lot of our music is consumed while doing something else, as opposed to just, I'm watching live music.
Exactly, yeah.
So,
or even in your home on a recorded version.
Yeah.
Like for me, there's something I love to do when I've got the house to myself. Is to swoon. I have a swoon session. And that involves a glass of wine, sitting up at my window where I can just see a lovely view of the burb. And at a certain time of day, at dusk.
Beautiful.
And in headphones, it has to be headphones to get the full experience. I'll play the Lark Ascending or, you know, something swoony like that. And it just transports me to another planet. And I feel so blessed that I have that ability to engage in the lovely emotive journey of whatever piece I'm playing. Because I think sometimes people are missing out having that experience when you're deadened to the noise of everyday life and the distractions that are a myriad amongst media and all that sort of stuff. Just to have that moment where you can switch it all off, not even have the phone in your hand to be distracted by it. Just sit and look and be. You really feel the gorgeousness of that music.
Absolutely. Like the first time I ever put a pair of noise cancelling headphones on, I was just like,
right.
Oh my God.
It's incredible. You can hear them breathing.
Yeah, especially on a long flight. It's like,
magic.
Sitting on a flight, no problem anymore, you know?
Oh, it's wonderful.
Yeah.
So Shenzo, we always end our interviews with the question of what is the one thing or three things, whichever you like, that gives you the most joy. And it doesn't have to be professionally, of course, because obviously you love what you do, but outside of that or inside of it, or
I think
what tickles your fancy?
So three things. I would say like if I took one of those three things and went on a daily basis, I would say a fantastic cup of coffee in the morning.
I hear you.
I would also say in the morning a fantastic walk of some description through nature, or just somewhere to kind of like let your thoughts roll away without any kind of like, you know, preconception or any worry or anything. So getting out into nature would be the answer to that one. Just being part of the greater world and just being reminded of like, you know, how insignificant but significant you are. Like it's a weird duality in that sense, because, you know, you are just this little speck on the planet Earth, but you have the power to influence many people potentially to care for it better or something, you know, like whatever it might be. Third thing, I would say, like, because music is so integral to everything I do, it's hard to say, oh, look, you know, I like to
binge on Netflix.
I like to borrow a jet ski and just go, you know, or whatever it might be. The closest it would come to would be, I did have a passion for flying when I was young. You know, that was something I never went into professionally, but, you know, I get sucked into watching in the very very spare few minutes I have, watching instructional videos on how to fly planes. Like that seems to be something I just like. That fantasy will always be there.
Yeah.
And
never say never. You never know.
And you never know. But it's kind of, I think it's at the moment anyway. It's kind of more enjoyable watching it from a distance and going, because luckily I'd done a tour in a light plane for 7 weeks. I was so lucky to do this tour through regional Queensland. We went up to the Torres Strait. We went all various parts, and I got to sit in the second pilot seat while the pilot was doing all the responsible stuff, the hard stuff. I'm going, this is like, every day we got up, we got in the plane, we took off, we went and landed at a school, did a show. Next day did the same thing. And I'm going, this is actually the best. Like if I was the pilot, I'd be like, oh, how much fuel have I got? Oh, what with the wind? Oh, geez, better not crash. It'll be so much more like stress and like don't die, as the passenger, you're like, I can just sit back and this guy's got it all happening. Like, and he did. It was just totally all over it. So I don't think I'm going to go get my pilot's license anytime soon because I feel like it might take away the magic.
Exactly. Yeah, it's too much to think about.
Too much to think about. So I mean, so that's like a thing I like to enjoy, being a fly on the wall occasionally, and
fly on the wall, watching flying.
Remind myself of that childhood fantasy that I'll never probably ever seriously, do, because it is an expensive thing and it's to maintain, like it's and it has to, for me, there has to be a kind of a connection. It has to be a reason. Why do you want to get, like, just to fly around on a weekends, like that's not enough of a reason for me. I would want, hey, we need you to fly this plane because you're touring a show and we need you to go get your license so that you could do the tour. I'd be like, great, okay, there's a good enough reason. I will do that. There's a good enough reason.
Thank you very much. Yep.
But so coffee, sit in nature, on a walk, and fantasize about flying planes.
I love it. I think that's terrific.
There's probably more if I think about it. Because it's
always, because we ask people every time, and it's such a, it's more times than not the most simplest of things that give you the biggest buzz for your day, and just to appreciate it in the moment is even better. And I totally get the coffee thing. Oh my God. But and music and it's wonderful. Shenzo, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for showing us your beautiful property and the music. Thank you for the music.
Yeah, anytime.
It's been great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for watching, everyone. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.